And if you want to know why the wind is so strong, it's because this is the Atlantic coast. The Arabs started at the Red Sea, and within 80 years, they'd come as far west as it's possible to go. Or is it?
It was in 711 that a Moorish general, Tariq ibn Ziyad, came here, and having given his name to the rock of Gibraltar, Jebel Tariq, he then urged his horse into the waves and cried, "Unknown land to the west, if I could find thee, I would convert thee to the true faith." Now that has to be one of the greatest what-ifs of history. Imagine if a Moorish general, and not a Spanish-sponsored navigator, had discovered the New World.
Instead, they pushed on north into France, and in 733 there took place a battle that has loomed large in the fevered imaginations of Western Europeans. Because it was only at Poitiers, less than 200 miles south of Paris, that the Muslim armies were finally halted by Charles Martel. For a long time, it was seen as the turning point of European destiny. And in the words of Gibbon, "The Rhine is not more impassable than the Nile or Euphrates, and the Arabian fleet might have sailed without a naval combat into the mouth of the Thames." Perhaps the interpretation of the Quran would now be taught in the schools of Oxford, and her pupils might demonstrate to a circumcised people the sanctity and truth of the revelation of Muhammad. Now, I'm a big fan of Edward Gibbon, but is he still thought to be sound 200 years on? Miriam, tell me about the Battle of Poitiers. I've always been told that it was a real key moment for the history of Europe. Charles Martel, had he not won, the whole of European history would have been different. Is that right?
No, that's not.
That's not right.
That's
I'm
not right
wrong
at
again.
all. Yes, totally wrong. In fact, this battle is une parmi tant d'autres. One battle inside all the battles. In fact, we are at the moment when Muslims could not go further into the north. You see, at that time, they began to be être battus.
To be beaten.
Yes, they began to be beaten. In fact, there is Poitiers, but there are other battles.
They were starting to lose anyway.
Yes, exactly.
You mean they were reaching the natural limits of their advance?
Yes, that is the idea.
Okay.
Yes, they had settled in Spain and also in the south of France. So I think that they wanted to stay. They wanted to consolidate that particular territory. What they had.
In France, Poitiers became part of a national myth, as historians looked back at the 7th and 8th centuries and concluded that this first clash between Islam and Christianity was genuinely decisive in the creation of modern Europe and in the destruction of the ancient world. For centuries, indeed, the greatest historical minds have puzzled over why the Roman Empire declined and fell in the first place. In 1935, the great Belgian historian Henri Pirenne supplied a revolutionary answer. It wasn't the Germanic tribes who wrecked the unity of the Roman Empire, said Pirenne. Oh no, they may have had wacky Germanic names like Gondebaud and Clodomir, but they still used Roman coins, they still spoke Latin of a kind, they still aspired to Romanitas. And in fact, it wasn't, said Pirenne, until the middle of the 7th century when suddenly the Arabs arrived. And with lightning speed, they swept through some of the richest territories of the old Roman Empire. And it was then, he said, that the economic unity of the Roman system was destroyed and the sweet, slow sunset of the Roman Empire gave way to the Middle Ages. And instead of a great whole, you had two opposed civilizations with little understanding of each other and not even much interest in each other. What is so sad is that the same could still be said today. Let's look at Spain, where the Moors, as the Arabs here were known, were established for 900 years and where the glories of medieval Muslim and Jewish culture are still 5-star items on the tourist trail. Here's Maimonides, the Jewish sage born in Cordoba, the foremost doctor of his age, a polymath whose career was only made possible by the Muslim Enlightenment. though his toe is still stroked by reverential tourists, and though this very flamenco music may have Muslim roots, there are some Spaniards who are a little resentful of the touristic obsession with Spain's Moorish past. Take the great mosque at Cordoba. You'll find plenty of Spaniards keen to point out that it's now a Roman Catholic cathedral built on the site of an even earlier Christian church, dating from the time of the Visigoths, whom the Moors had superseded. And somehow that misses the point that this mosque is one of the most extraordinary religious buildings on earth.
It's structures like this that gave medieval Cordoba the name the ornament of the world, with its fountains, its thousands of libraries, well-paved, well-lit streets. It made places like London look frankly barbaric.
And 10th century observers came back stunned with tales of this city of 900 baths and its library with 600,000 volumes, and everywhere men devising new techniques for irrigation, silk manufacture, algebra, astronomy, before knocking off a quick lyric in which they liken their beloved to a pomegranate or a persimmon on the new paper they were introducing from Andalusia to the rest of Europe. And if they were really lucky, the visitors might be admitted to the enchanted world of Madinat al-Zahra, a 10th century summer palace built by the Muslim Caliph of Cordoba and still being excavated today.
This is only a tiny fraction of the 112-acre 10th century Muslim Versailles, complete with bar nooks and fragrant jasmine-scented walks. And if you're asking yourself why the Caliph built this here on the hill overlooking Cordoba, it wasn't just because it was cooler or because they could make use of the running water. It was so that the people for miles around could see this great white city, this symbol of Muslim power and luxury.
In fact, the whole thing was so deeply civilized that recent commentators have been tempted to idealize Moorish Al-Andalus. They have seen it as a social paradise, a lost Eden in which Moors, Jews and Christians lived in the kind of perfect harmony you associate with a glutinous song by Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder. They've called it convivencia, living together.
Western historians have long had a tendency to idealize Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, as a kind of dream world, a happy community of poets and scholars with women's writing circles and important astronomical discoveries, as though 10th century Cordoba offered a beacon of hope to us from 1,000 years ago about how Christians and Muslims can still live together happily. And yet, of course, it wasn't really quite like that. What sticks in the mind is not just the occasional persecutions in which both sides indulged, it's the standoffishness of one religious community toward the other, the lack of interest, the refusal properly to mix. Convivencia may have meant living next to each other, but it wasn't a multicultural melting pot.
For one thing, the Arab overlords conducted their usual policies of discrimination against the non-Muslims in their midst.
They had to accept second-class citizenship. They had disadvantages like not being able to hold power offices. They could not be superior to Muslims in any way. Say, to have a Muslim slave was impossible, whereas a Muslim could have Christian slaves or Jewish slaves.
And were they encouraged to convert to Islam?
Yes, they were. There was a proselytizing process and in all the areas conquered by the Muslims. And of course, the Muslims thought that the rest of the people were wrong in the